What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the Specialist Basic Training is now here for COD World War II. This is like the Specialist from Modern Warfare 3, where you earn perks slowly as you get kills within a single life, and once you reach a certain limit, you end up with a Specialist bonus, which awards you with essentially all of the perks in the game. Today, I want to share with you guys what I feel are the best setups for the Specialist Basic Training to maximize your success and go on longer streaks and earn more V2 rockets. If you're looking to get your first V2, or you're just looking to get them more consistently, Specialist is definitely going to be the way to go. And first up, I want to kick it off with the proper combinations of divisions with the Specialist Basic Training skill. Something that's really important to point out when you're choosing your division while using Specialist is many of the perks that the divisions have are going to be covered within your Specialist bonus. They're going to be covered by one of the basic trainings that you end up getting when you get your Specialist bonus. As a result, there's a lot of overlap, and I like to build my Specialist classes without having too much overlap once I reach that Specialist bonus. So a great example of this is the Airborne division. If you're using the Airborne division with Specialist and you end up getting that Specialist bonus, most of the perks from Airborne are already covered in a basic training, and therefore it's like you're wasting your division at that point. Essentially, all you would get out of Airborne once you reach your Specialist bonus is you'd be able to climb over obstacles faster. Pretty much all of its other perks are covered in some capacity by a basic training already, so it's pretty much useless to combine Airborne with the Specialist Basic Training skill. On the other end of that, just to provide some contrast with this, if we're using the Armored division, none of the basic training skills we get with Specialist are going to give us reduced flinch, and this helps very significantly in a lot of gunfights. In addition to that, you get that extra bullet penetration, which none of the basic training skills award. Of course, you could use FMJ as one of your attachments, but you could even stack that with Armored and get extra bullet penetration if you wanted, and none of those basic training is going to help with that. And finally, none of the basic training skills will give you fire resistance like Armored will, so that can often save your life in situations where you have enemies with shotguns and incendiary shells, or maybe even against a flamethrower or a Molotov or something. So unlike Airborne, which essentially only gives you one perk that you won't be getting with your Specialist bonus, you're now getting 3 perks, and therefore Armored is an excellent choice with Specialist. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail with all the other divisions, but I briefly want to explain why I like using or dislike using each division with Specialist. With Infantry, all you basically gain is an extra attachment on your primary as well as your secondary, which might be worth it for some people on some particular weapons that require a lot of attachments. But personally, I would just stay away from it because that's basically all you're getting is that extra attachment. As for Mountain is a good choice in my mind simply because it keeps you off the radar 100% of the time, unlike Flanker, which will only keep you off the radar when you're moving. Also, Mountain is the only thing that will keep you hidden from enemy-controlled streaks, so if they're dropping a glide bomb or a fighter pilot on you, which would be really annoying during a streak, if you're using Mountain, they won't be able to see you with that. And finally, you get completely silent movement with Mountain, which you don't get with any of the other basic training skills. Inconspicuous gives you slightly quieter movement, but your footsteps are definitely still audible. As for Expeditionary, I personally don't really like pairing this with Specialist, but I could understand why some people would. With this one, you get a ton of benefits to your tacticals and your lethals, like you replenish them over time and everything, so you can potentially use them several times in a life as you're trying to work your way up on a big streak towards a V2 rocket or something. But for me, it just doesn't help enough with face-to-face gunfights. It doesn't really help me too much with my awareness or positioning, and therefore, I personally don't like combining Expeditionary with Specialist. As for Resistance, this is one that I really like pairing with Specialist, and the main reason for this is you get that ping every time you kill or get an assist on an enemy. There will be a ping that comes out of their body, and any of their teammates that happen to be within a radius of them, you will be able to see them with that ping. This is very, very useful when you're going on a long streak. In addition, you get that Sixth Sense type ability as well as a Scrambler. Personally, I like turning that off most of the time, so enemies can't try and pinpoint where I am based on that Scrambler. And also you get louder enemy footsteps, which realistically, I don't really notice that all that much. Mainly, I like using Resistance with Specialist for that ping ability, because you don't get that exact same ping ability when you're using any of the other basic training skills, like Clandestine, which requires you to actually walk over a pack after killing an enemy, then you get your ping. It's not nearly as good. This leaves us with the final division, and this is the brand new one called Cavalry. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, this is definitely going to be an overpowered combination using Cavalry combined with Specialist. I personally disagree, and I wouldn't recommend using Specialist with Cavalry. While it is great to have that shield on your back, and it will often save your life from people that sneak up behind you and start shooting you in the back, the big thing to keep in mind with this is you don't get any attachments whatsoever on your weapon unless you're using a pistol, which isn't necessarily the best way to approach getting consistent V2 rockets. It can be done, but it's not necessarily the best. As a result, I personally just stay far away from the Cavalry division if I'm trying to go on really long streaks with Specialist and trying to get a V2 rocket. So this leaves us with Armored, Mountain, and Resistance. These are my top 3 divisions to use with the Specialist basic training skill. Now let's get into a couple setups. And one thing to note with these setups is the gun is basically going to be your personal preference. Don't necessarily just use exactly what I'm using as far as your weapon and attachments. These can be swapped out whenever you want. They don't need to be exactly like this. It's more so the way that the perks are set up and the order that they're set up for that style of play for that particular class. So first up is a nice consistent SMG rushing aggressive sort of specialist class. With this one we're using the armor division, which is excellent for that flinch reduction, plus right out of the gate you have that explosive resistance as well as tactical resistance, which can be helpful as you start to work your way up to the specialist bonus. I decided to throw on the new SMG here with steady aim, grip, and extended mags. Again, you can swap that out for any SMG that you want. Even a rifle would fit well with this class. For our specialist perks, as we work our way up, we're going to start it off with Scoped. That'll be our first one, so that's going to help us win gunfights, so I like unlocking that nice and early. Then we have Hustle. I really like the ability to reload quickly, especially if I'm dealing with multiple enemies and being quite aggressive. And finally, I have Forage on here. I found, especially with a really high fire rate gun, which I really like using the ZK383 in the faster fire rate mode. When I'm using that, I find at this point, sometimes I'm running out of ammo or I'm starting to run low on ammo, and I don't like having to worry about that. So I feel like that's a good place for Forage, and then after that, you get your specialist bonus, and you can continue your streak. As for the secondary, lethal, and tactical, they're going to be basically the same on all of these classes. You can use whatever you feel comfortable with here. I personally use a 9mm SAP with extended mags, a sticky grenade as my lethal, and a concussion as my tactical grenade. Next up, we have a slight variation of this. This is with a rifle. Again, you can pop in whichever rifle you'd like. Even an LMG would work well with this particular one. And the slight adjustment I made, once again, we're using armored, but the adjustment I made is we're still getting scope for our first basic training skill. The second one, though, is going to be lookout. I feel like lookout is very, very helpful when you're trying to keep your distance a little bit, like you would be doing with rifles or LMGs. And then, once again, we get forage as our third basic training skill. Just a very slight variation. I don't really feel like Hustle is as necessary as I'm working my way up on the streak towards the specialist bonus, and Lookout is going to be a much better option if you're trying to keep your distance. This brings us to the next one, which is our Stealth class. With this one, we're using any SMG with a suppressor and then whichever attachments you like. Personally, I think the MP40 pairs really well with a suppressor, so I'm going to be using that one. For our specialist training, once again, Scoped. I really like using Scopes. I can't say that enough. I feel like it helps me win so many gunfights, being able to strafe faster in gunfights, as well as essentially eliminate that idle sway. Then we have Hunker. I feel like Hunker is quite important to get nice and early on because there are plenty of nades and S-mines and things like that out there. And then after that, we're going to be using Hustle. This one is going to be excellent if you want to try and flank your enemies and just basically stay completely off their radar and be a really big annoyance to them. So last but definitely not least, I really like this particular class setup. With this one, we're going to be pairing the Resistance Division with Specialists. I just threw on a PPSH here. Again, swap that out for any SMG that you want. Even rifles work well with this. Specialist trainings are going to be Scoped, Hunker, and Hustle. Once again, the same thing as with our Mountain Division. I really like getting that Hunker nice and early on, or relatively early on, so you don't get blown up. And with this one, those radar pings should be helping you a ton. And I think this is probably one of the most effective classes for earning V2 rockets for me personally. That ping that you get on the radar is extremely valuable, and it's definitely going to help you with your awareness on the map. So there we have it. That's going to wrap it up for my top class setups for the Specialist Basic Training skill, as well as for trying to go on those V2 rocket streaks. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what's your personal favorite setup with the Specialist Basic Training skill? Is it pretty similar to one of my classes, or significantly different? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.